Shalom, shalom, mishpocha. Welcome to another edition of Ray Bash's Ramblings. I'm your host, Rabbi Yehuda Ben Shomer, and today I want to talk to you about angels or men. In Matthew chapter 4, verse 11, it reads, "Then the devil leaveth him, and behold, angels came and ministered unto him." You know, when one leaves the familiar paths of Christendom and begin to walk the Hebraic path of the Netzari, and as one mind and spirit begins to be transformed, the Brit Chadesha, or the New Testament, the renewed covenant, is read with fresh new eyes. It's as if it's a brand new book, and things jump out that previously has just seemed uneventful or mundane or unimportant. So in the passage that I just read, we may envision a Renaissance artist depiction of heavenly winged angels dressed in colorful garments and golden wings coming down and cradling Yeshua in their arms as they feed him honey cakes and give him a cruse of water after his 40-day temptation and fast in the desert wilderness. But perhaps this is yet another Gentile misinterpretation of Scripture. I know that angelic beings exist and appear in Scripture and do the bidding of the Almighty Creator. But has Christianity read angels in places where there really are none? For example, by now it's well established that the angels of the 7 churches in the book of Revelation is actually rabbis and or congregational leaders of these 7 synagogues and or messianic assemblies, if you will. For what good would it be if Yochanan, John, to write to an angel, the angelic protector of these 7 congregations, and not the leaders themselves? The Greek word for angel, angelos, can also be translated as messenger. And in fact, in the Aramaic translation into the English, the word is actually messenger. It's not translated as the word angel. So in like manner, in Matthew chapter 4, verse 11, is it really speaking of winged angelic beings or mere mortal messengers that minister to Yeshua after his temptation in the desert? Again, the Greek word in the passage, translated into English as angel from the Greek word angelos, is a word that can be translated just as equally as messenger, and it is translated as such in the Aramaic English New Testament. So to get to the bottom of this, let's look at the preceding verses. In Matthew chapter 8, verse 10, it says, "Again, the devil taketh him unto an exceedingly high mountain, and showeth him all the kingdoms of the world, and the glory of them. And he said unto him, All these things I will give thee, if thou wilt bow down and worship me. Then saith Yeshua, Jesus unto him, Get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve." So it's talking about an exceedingly high mountain spoken of here, which is believed to be among the desert mountains and caves of the Essene and or the Qumran community. The desert places, the mountain regions in which they occupied during Yeshua's day. The same ones that produced the Dead Sea Scrolls is the very desert community that it is believed that Yochanan the Immerser, or John the Baptist, Yeshua's cousin, was actually a part of. So it was very likely that these very private Essenes were aware and were even tracking Yeshua's movements in their own backyard. They were such a exclusive community, and they were so protective of their community, they had left because of the corruption of the Pharisees and because of the corruption of the Sadducees, and forged their own community, many of them being of the Levitical stock, just as John, Yochanan was, and started, scribing and writing and translating and things of this nature. So whenever somebody was in their territory, I'm sure that they had lookouts and even tracking these people, saying, hey, what business do these people have doing out in the desert here? So, to further the case that these angels in Matthew 4:11 were actually Essenes of the desert Qumran community, let's look at verse 12 of Matthew chapter 4 and see what it reads. "Now when Jesus had heard that John, Yochanan, was cast into prison, he departed into Galilee." Okay, seeing as verse 11 speaks of angels, is right next to the verse 12, which speaks of Yeshua's cousin Yochanan being arrested, does it not make sense that Yeshua heard it from these Essene messengers and or angels, if you will, that assisted him after the temptation and fast, and who likely knew Yochanan, who likely knew John the Baptist personally, seeing as he was likely a former part of their community? Of course it does. It's more likely that these angels in Matthew chapter 11 were actually men. So it is my belief that these angels were members of the Essene/Qumran community that John the Baptist, Yochanan the Immerser, was a part of. And when they were tracking Yeshua in the desert and keeping tabs on his movements, when it looked as if he was in distress or looked as if he was in need, these Essene scouts, if you will, came and helped him. And once they recognized who it was, they said, "Oh, this is Yeshua. He's Yochanan's cousin." And they knew that recently Yochanan had went out from their community to make way for the Messiah, which was to come, to be that herald, to be that messenger. So it makes perfect sense that verse 11 would bleed right into verse 12, that it wouldn't be like a sudden stop and all of a sudden it's a new subject. No. It says, now when Yeshua heard that Yochanan was cast into prison, he departed into Galilee, which means when he heard this, he wasn't in Galilee. Where was he? He was in the desert. Who was he with? Most likely Essene messengers that took care of him, saw he was in distress or need, and took care of him after his fast and temptation in the desert. And when they recognized who it was, that it was Yeshua, that it was Yochanan's cousin, they said, "Hey, I don't know if you've heard, but Yochanan was arrested." And so it was after he heard this, after his temptation, after he got his strength back from the Essenes giving him food and water and strengthening him, he departed into Galilee. So again, it's one of these issues and one of these passages in scriptures where if you want to believe they were heavenly beings, that's fine. If you want to believe they were men, that's fine too. It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't change anything. It's just one of those things that we don't need to fight over, but it just really jumped out at me this time around when I was reading it, and I decided to share it with you because it's been my experience that God is not going to use something supernatural when he can perfectly use something natural. So since the Essenes were in the neighborhood, they were friends of John, it makes perfect sense that they were probably likely the messengers, or angels, if you will, that ministered unto Yeshua after his 40-day fast and temptation in the desert. There's really no reason why it had to be or would have been heavenly angelic beings, because they were people in the desert perfectly capable of taking care of him. And if they were against the corruption of the Sadducees and Pharisees, they were pretty much on Yeshua's side, because he railed against those things as well in his in his public ministry. And likely knowing that he was related to Yochanan, one of their former members of the Qumran community, they decided to come and help. So anyways, I thought this was interesting enough to share it with you. And thank you again for watching. Shalom and Shavua Tov.